The space elevator descended through the atmosphere of Varquen with a gentle hum, its transparent walls offering a panoramic view of the most politically significant planet in the known universe. Dr. Aaron Voss pressed his palm against the crystalline barrier, watching as the sprawling metropolis below came into focus, a labyrinth of impossible architecture that defied Earth's understanding of physics. Spiraling towers that reached toward the three moons hanging like pale sentinels in the lavender sky. "First time seeing the Conclave?" asked the pilot, a tall, willowy being with skin that shifted colors with each movement. Aaron nodded, unable to find words. After a lifetime studying the stars, after decades of academic discourse about the possibility of extraterrestrial governance, he was about to walk into the heart of it all. The supreme alien conclave, the gathering of 3,000 species that had, for centuries, determined the fate of the galaxy while Earth remained isolated, forgotten, or perhaps deliberately excluded. Until now. They say your world declined previous invitations. The pilot continued, adjusting controls with elongated fingers. Something about internal disagreements. Curious that they would send a historian instead of a diplomat this time. Aaron's reflection stared back at him from the glass. A man of 53, his once dark hair now streaked with silver, his eyes carrying the weight of someone who had spent too much time in archives and not enough among the living. He straightened the formal attire he'd been instructed to wear, a simple, dignified black suit adorned only with a small pin bearing Earth's symbol, a blue sphere embraced by a silver olive branch. "Sometimes," Aaron replied, finding his voice at last, "the only way forward is to understand what lies behind us." The year was 2441. After what historians had dubbed the Silent Century, a period where humanity had turned inward, rebuilding from ecological disasters and political upheavals, Earth had received an unexpected message. The Supreme Conclave was extending a formal invitation, offering humanity a seat at the table where galactic decisions were made. What should have been cause for celebration had instead sparked fierce debate among Earth's unified government. Some saw opportunity, others suspected a trap. Trust in interstellar politics had eroded after decades of minimal contact. When traditional diplomats and politicians had balked at the assignment, citing insufficient intelligence about conclave motivations, the choice had fallen to someone who might recognize historical patterns in alien behavior. Someone whose knowledge of Earth's own complicated past might serve as a guide to its future. Someone expendable, Aaron thought bitterly. Someone whose failure wouldn't impact any political career. The elevator slowed as it approached the surface, and Aaron felt the subtle shift in gravity, slightly lighter than Earth, but not enough to require adjustment implants. Through the windows, he could see the central dome of the conclave hall, a massive structure that seemed to be composed of living crystal, pulsing with an inner light that changed from azure to gold as clouds passed overhead. "We have arrived, Dr. Voss," the pilot announced. "Your quarters have been prepared in the Earth Delegation Wing. The preliminary session begins in 6 hours. "Earth Delegation Wing?" Aaron asked, puzzled. "I was told I would be the only representative." The pilot's skin rippled with what might have been amusement. "The wing has existed for 123 standard years. It has remained empty, but maintained, as is custom for all invited species. 123 years, more than a century of waiting for Earth to take its place." The realization sent a chill through Aaron's spine. As he stepped from the elevator onto Varquen's soil for the first time, he was greeted by a small delegation, 3 different species standing in perfect formation. At their center stood a being unlike any Aaron had seen in the xenobiology archives. Tall and regal, with a crest of what appeared to be crystalline filaments where hair might be on a human, and skin that held a bluish tint that complemented eyes of deep violet. "I am Zankal of the Shari," the being said, her voice melodic and perfectly translated through the universal translator embedded behind Aaron's ear. "I have been assigned as your cultural attaché during your stay. These are my associates who will assist with your technical and security needs." Aaron inclined his head respectfully. "I am honored, Zankal. I confess I am unprepared for such accommodation. The Conclave takes hospitality seriously. Dr. Voss, she replied, leading him toward a sleek transport vehicle. Especially for worlds that have been absent for so long. There was something in her tone, a subtle emphasis that suggested more than simple diplomatic courtesy. Aaron had spent decades analyzing historical texts, learning to read between lines written by beings with vastly different perspectives. The same skill, he realized, might serve him well here. I sense there is much I should know before the session, he said carefully. Zankal's crystalline crest shimmered in what might have been agreement. More than you can imagine, Earth representative, but first, you should see your seat. The transport moved silently through wide avenues populated by beings of every conceivable form. Some walked on multiple limbs, others floated, and still others moved in ways that defied Aaron's comprehension. Yet despite the diversity, there seemed to be a natural order, a flow to the movement that spoke of long-established protocols and hierarchies. When they reached the conclave hall, Aaron was led through security measures so advanced they seemed like magic, then through corridors that spiraled upward toward the central chamber. With each step, the gravity of his mission pressed more heavily upon him. He was not merely an observer here, he was Earth's voice, Earth's presence after more than a century of silence. Before we enter, Zankal said, pausing before massive doors that appeared to be made of living wood interwoven with strands of light. You should understand that the Conclave operates on complex protocols. As an invited species that has not yet formalized its position, you will be permitted to observe but not speak during the preliminary session. Aaron nodded, relieved. Observation first. That was his strength. However, she continued, there is a matter of some urgency that may involve Earth directly. A vote is scheduled for the final day regarding the Lesser Planet Statute. If approved, it would classify non-participatory worlds as protectorates rather than sovereign entities, limiting their influence in galactic affairs. And Earth would fall under this classification? Aaron asked, feeling a cold knot form in his stomach. Unless its representative formally claims Earth's seat, Zankal confirmed. There are those in the conclave who believe worlds that remain silent forfeit their right to be heard when they finally choose to speak. The doors opened before Aaron could respond, revealing a chamber so vast it seemed impossible it could fit within the building he had entered. Thousands of seats arranged in concentric circles descended toward a central platform, each designated for a different species. Some were recognizably chair-like, while others were pools of liquid, hovering platforms, or structures that defied easy categorization. But what seized Aaron's attention was a single seat, positioned prominently among what appeared to be the most influential positions in the chamber. Unlike the others, which were occupied by beings engaged in quiet conversation, this one stood empty, a large, dignified chair carved from what appeared to be dark wood, inlaid with Earth's symbol. Empty, yet unmistakably waiting. As you can see, Zankal said quietly, Earth's absence has been conspicuous. Aaron stared at the vacant seat, understanding washing over him like a cold wave. This wasn't merely about attending a meeting or observing protocols. The empty chair made a statement to the entire gathered assembly that humanity had chosen isolation, had rejected its place in the greater community of intelligent life. And now, some faction wished to ensure that choice became permanent. Who? Aaron asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Who advocates for this lesser planet statute? Zankal's gaze shifted to a section of the chamber where beings of particularly imposing appearance were gathered. At their center sat a massive entity with slate-gray skin and eyes that glowed with an inner fire. Elar Thrun, she said, Supreme Overseer of the Conservative Alliance. He believes species that cannot participate in galactic governance should not influence galactic decisions. And he has been waiting a very long time for Earth's seat to be officially declared vacant. Aaron felt the weight of history pressing down upon him, not just Earth's history, which he had studied all his life, but a vaster, more complex interstellar history he was only beginning to glimpse. Whatever had brought him here, Whatever political calculations had led to his selection, he now understood the true nature of his mission. He was not here to observe. He was here to decide whether humanity would claim its place among the stars or surrender it forever. The preliminary session proved both fascinating and bewildering. Aaron watched from an observer's gallery as representatives from across the galaxy engaged in rituals of greeting, debates on resource allocation, and discussions of cosmic phenomena that threatened certain regions. The proceedings were orderly, yet alien, following patterns of discourse that sometimes seemed intuitive and other times completely foreign. Throughout it all, Earth's empty seat remained a silent rebuke. When the session concluded, Aaron found himself drawn not to his assigned quarters, but to the Conclave's historical archives. If he was to understand the present situation, he needed context, the very thing Earth had been denied during its century of isolation. The archive was a marvel of technology and biological integration, with data stored not just in machines, but in living crystalline structures that responded to mental queries. After receiving clearance to access non-classified materials, Aaron began his research, starting with the history of Earth's relationship with the Conclave. Hours passed as he absorbed information, his historian's mind cataloging and connecting disparate facts. Earth had been invited to join the Conclave in 2318, shortly after humanity's first successful faster-than-light journey. There had been initial enthusiasm, followed by hesitation as Earth's governments debated the implications. Before a decision could be reached, the Great Collapse had begun, an ecological and economic crisis that had turned humanity's focus inward for generations. But there was something strange in the records. References to Earth prior to the first official invitation, tantalizingly brief mentions that suggested earlier contact, earlier relationships. Yet whenever Aaron tried to access these records, he encountered restrictions. "You will not find what you seek in the public archives," came a voice from behind him. Aaron turned to find Zancal watching him, her crystalline crest dimmed in the archive's subdued lighting. "There are gaps," he said, "inconsistencies." "Yes," she agreed, moving closer. "History, as you surely know, is written by those who hold power at the time of writing." "Are you suggesting the Conclave's historical records have been edited?" Zancal's eyes shifted, scanning the empty chamber before she spoke again, her voice lower. "I am suggesting that the truth of Earth's relationship with the galactic community is more complex than what appears in official records. There are those of us who remember, or who have access to memories that others would prefer to forget." Aaron studied her, this alien being who seemed to be offering help for reasons he couldn't yet understand. Why would anyone want to erase Earth from galactic history? "Perhaps," she replied, "because your world once played a role that some find inconvenient to their current political objectives." She extended a data crystal, offering it to him. "This contains access codes to restricted sections of the historical database, not everything, but enough to begin. Use it in your quarters, where monitoring is less intensive." Aaron accepted the crystal, suspicion warring with curiosity. "Why are you helping me?" Zancal's crest shimmered with what might have been emotion. "Because I belong to a faction that believes in historical truth, Dr. Voss, and because my ancestors owed their survival to yours." Before Aaron could question her further, she was gone, leaving him with more questions than answers and a data crystal that might contain either salvation or a trap. That night, in the privacy of his quarters, Aaron inserted the crystal into his personal terminal. The screen flickered, then displayed archives far older than those he had accessed earlier. He began to read, and as the hours passed, a very different picture of Earth's relationship with the galaxy emerged. Earth had not been ignored for centuries. It had been deliberately isolated, quarantined, some records suggested, following an event referred to only as the MindNet catastrophe. Details were frustratingly sparse, but Aaron pieced together a narrative that contradicted everything he had been told. 120 years ago, a psychic plague had swept through the Conclave species, a viral consciousness that had infected the neural networks that many advanced civilizations use to enhance their cognitive abilities. The plague had spread rapidly, threatening to destroy not just individual minds, but entire cultures that relied on shared consciousness. And somehow, Earth had been involved in stopping it. The records were incomplete, redacted in crucial places, but they painted a picture of human intervention, a solution devised by Earth scientists that had saved countless lives across the galaxy. Yet instead of gratitude, the aftermath had seen Earth's influence diminished, its representatives gradually excluded from conclave affairs until the final invitation that had gone unanswered during the Great Collapse. But why? What had happened to transform Earth from savior to outcast? A notification interrupted his research, a message from Zankal. "You have found the beginning of the truth," it read, "but not its heart. If you wish to know more, meet me at the Memorial Gardens during the third cycle rest period. Come alone and tell no one." Aaron stared at the message, weighing his options. He had come to Varquen as a historian, seeking to understand Earth's place in the galactic community. Now he found himself embroiled in what appeared to be a political conspiracy spanning more than a century. He thought of the empty chair in the conclave chamber, of Elar Thrun's determination to ensure it remained empty. Whatever had happened in the past, the future of Earth's relationship with the galaxy would be decided in the coming days. He needed the truth, all of it. When the third cycle began, Aaron made his way to the Memorial Gardens, a vast space at the heart of the diplomatic quarter where monuments honored the fallen of various species. The garden was nearly deserted at this hour, with only a few beings meditating among the strange and beautiful plants that represented worlds across the galaxy. Zankal waited beside a reflecting pool, her crystalline crest catching the light of Varquen's moons. She was not alone. Beside her stood two other beings, one a massive, armored creature with multiple limbs, the other small and delicate, with wings that shimmered like oil on water. "Dr. Voss," Zankal said, "these are my associates, Kreltor of the Vishanti Hegemony and Linny of the Whisper Collective." Aaron nodded respectfully to each. "I assume this meeting involves more than a history lesson." "Indeed," said Kreltor, his voice deep and resonant despite coming through the translator. "It involves the future of your world and perhaps the conclave itself." "We represent the Truth Reconciliation Committee," Linnae added, her voice musical and light. "An unofficial group dedicated to correcting historical injustices perpetrated by previous conclave administrations. Including," Aaron guessed, "whatever happened between Earth and the conclave after this mind-net catastrophe." The three aliens exchanged glances, a silent communication that needed no translation. "What happened," Zankal said finally, "was fear. Fear disguised as gratitude. Fear masked by protocol and procedure, but fear nonetheless." "I don't understand." "The mind-net catastrophe was not merely a virus or a technological failure," Kreltor explained. "It was an attack. An attempt by a non-corporeal species to harvest the collective consciousness of the conclave races. They had infiltrated slowly, over centuries, planting dormant connections in our neural networks. When they activated their trap," Linnae continued, "billions of minds began to be drained, their consciousness absorbed into what we now know was a predatory hive mind that fed on thought itself." "And Earth stopped this?" Aaron asked, still struggling to connect this information to humanity's subsequent isolation. "Not Earth as a political entity," Zankal clarified. "A small group of human scientists who had been studying consciousness transfer technology. They developed a countersignal, a kind of psychic firewall that could block the harvesting process. But to implement it, they had to integrate themselves directly into the affected networks. They sacrificed themselves," Kreltor said solemnly. 12 humans gave their lives to save trillions of non-humans. Their consciousness was fragmented across the networks they saved, their physical bodies left in vegetative states. "It was the greatest act of interspecies altruism in recorded history," Linnae added. "And the conclave's response was to bury it." Aaron felt his historian's mind racing, connecting dots, seeing patterns emerge from chaos. Because if the truth were known, humanity would have enormous moral authority within the conclave. The debt would be too great. Precisely, Zankal confirmed. The political structure of the conclave is built on carefully balanced power. If one species, especially a relatively young one like humanity, were suddenly elevated by such a debt of gratitude, it would destabilize everything. Aaron finished. So instead, they isolated Earth, gradually reduced contact, and eventually rewrote history to minimize human involvement. And now, Kreltor said gravely, Ilar Thrun seeks to complete the process with this lesser planet statute. If passed, Earth will officially have no voice in conclave affairs, despite the seat that has been maintained in acknowledgement of a debt that can never be repaid. Aaron looked at each of them in turn. Why are you telling me this? Why now? Because the balance of power is shifting. Zankal explained. Many younger species have joined the conclave in recent decades. Species with no memory of the original events and no stake in maintaining the cover-up. Ilar's faction fears that if Earth were to take its rightful place now, the truth might emerge. And you want me to… what? Publicly accuse the conclave of a century-long conspiracy? I have no proof that would stand up to scrutiny. You have this, Linnae said, producing a small crystalline sphere that glowed with an inner light. Or rather, it has you. What is it? A fragment of Relian, Kreltor said reverently. The oldest artificial intelligence in the galaxy, and the only witness to the MindNet catastrophe that remains uncorrupted by subsequent historical revisions. Relian can verify your claims, Zankal added, but it will only activate for a consciousness it recognizes as worthy, one that values truth above power. Aaron stared at the glowing sphere, feeling the weight of history pressing down upon him once again. He had come to the conclave as an observer, a scholar seeking to understand. Now he was being asked to become an advocate, to challenge the very foundation of interstellar politics on behalf of a planet that had sent him as little more than a token representative. I need to think, he said finally. The vote on the Lesser Planet Statute is in 3 days. Zankal reminded him. If you choose to act, we will stand with you. But the decision must be yours. As Aaron returned to his quarters, his mind was a storm of conflicting thoughts. He had spent his life studying the past, finding patterns in history that might guide the future, but he had never imagined that he would be called upon to shape that future directly. In the darkness of his room, he found himself thinking of Enya, his wife, lost 5 years earlier to a disease that medical science had identified too late to cure. She had been the activist between them, the one who had marched for causes and spoken truth to power while he had remained in his archives, analyzing the world from a safe distance. What would you do, my love? He whispered to the empty air. What would you have me become? The answer came not in words, but in memory. Enya standing before a crowd, her voice clear and strong. History is not just what happened, but what we choose to remember. And that choice shapes who we become. With sudden clarity, Aaron knew that he had not been sent to the conclave by accident or as a political placeholder. Someone on Earth, someone with access to information he had lacked, had known exactly what awaited him here. Had known that a historian might recognize the patterns of suppressed truth that a diplomat would miss. He had been chosen not despite being a scholar, but because of it. The next morning, Aaron attended the second preliminary session, watching the proceedings with new eyes. What had seemed merely alien now revealed itself as a complex dance of power and influence. He could see the factions more clearly. Ilar's conservative bloc, dominant but not unchallenged, Zankal's reformist alliance, smaller but growing, and the massive neutral species in between, waiting to see which way the political winds would blow. And through it all, Earth's chair remained empty, a silent rebuke, a challenge unanswered. During a recess, Aaron approached one of the subcommittee chambers where lesser matters were being debated. Here, even observers might be permitted to pose questions. He chose a session discussing cultural exchange protocols, seemingly innocuous, but with potential implications for the Lesser Planet Statute. When the chair recognized him, Aaron stood. Dr. Aaron Voss, Observer from Earth. I seek clarification on a historical matter related to these protocols. A murmur ran through the chamber. The Earth observer, speaking at last. The chair recognizes Earth's observer, said the moderator, a being with features so delicate they seemed almost insubstantial. Please proceed. The current protocols reference the Mutual Heritage Preservation Act, Aaron said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. Yet I find no mention of Earth's contributions to this framework in the public records. I am curious about this omission. The chamber fell silent. Aaron had chosen his question carefully, challenging not the current proceedings, but the historical record itself. Before the moderator could respond, a commanding voice cut through the silence. The observer from Earth exceeds his authority. Historical queries should be directed to the appropriate archives, not raised in policy discussions. Aaron turned to see Elar Thrun himself standing in the doorway, his massive form blocking the light from the corridor beyond. Their eyes met across the chamber, human and alien, and Aaron felt the weight of a century of suppressed truth between them. With respect, Overseer Thrun, Aaron replied, the archives appear to be incomplete on this matter. As Earth considers its position within the Conclave, understanding our shared history seems relevant to current policy discussions. Elar's eyes narrowed. Earth has had over a century to consider its position, observer. That it sends a historian rather than a diplomat at this late hour suggests a continued reluctance to engage meaningfully with galactic governance. Or perhaps, Aaron countered, it suggests that understanding the past is essential to shaping the future. The tension in the chamber was palpable. Aaron knew he was violating protocols, knew he was making himself a target, but he also knew that remaining silent would change nothing. This session is adjourned for consultations, the moderator announced abruptly. We will reconvene at next cycle. As the chamber emptied, Aaron found himself face to face with Elar Thrun. The alien overseer towered over him, his gray skin seemingly absorbing the light around him. You tread dangerous ground, Earth human, Elar said, his voice low enough that only Aaron could hear. Some histories are better left buried. Is that why your faction supports the Lesser Planet Statute? Aaron asked. To ensure those histories remain buried? Something flickered in Elar's glowing eyes. Surprise, perhaps, that this human observer knew more than anticipated. The statute exists to formalize what is already reality. Elar replied coldly. Worlds that choose isolation forfeit influence. That is the natural order. And if Earth chooses otherwise, if we claim our seat? Elar's massive form seemed to expand slightly, as if swelling with contained anger. After a century of silence, you would need more than an observer's credentials for that, historian. You would need the formal approval of the Security Council, which requires evidence of meaningful contribution to galactic stability. Evidence such as saving the Conclave from the MindNet catastrophe? Aaron asked quietly. For a moment, Elar's composure cracked, his eyes flaring with an inner fire. Then, just as quickly, his features settled into a mask of diplomatic indifference. I know not what fables you have been told, observer, but I suggest you focus on your assigned role. The vote proceeds in 2 days. Earth's chair will remain empty, as it has for over a century. That is the reality you would do well to accept. With that, Elar turned and left, his staff creating a sharp cadence against the polished floor. Aaron released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He had made his opening move, revealed that he knew at least part of the truth. Now the response would come, either suppression or further revelation. He didn't have to wait long. That evening, his quarters were ransacked, subtly, professionally, but unmistakably searched. His personal terminal had been accessed. The data crystal from Zankal was missing, and his research notes had been scrutinized. The message was clear: he was being watched, and his actions had not gone unnoticed. When Zankal arrived an hour later, her crystalline crest dimmed with concern. Aaron was waiting. They know, he said simply. Yes, she agreed. Elar's faction moves quickly when threatened, but they found nothing of consequence, I trust. Aaron gestured to his wrist. where he wore a simple band that had belonged to Enya, a memento he had brought from Earth. The crystal is here, hidden in plain sight. But it doesn't matter. They know I've been asking questions, connecting with your faction. The element of surprise is gone. Perhaps, Zankal said. But so is any pretense that this is merely about protocol or participation. Elar has revealed his hand by acting so aggressively. Others will notice. Will that be enough? No, she admitted. Not without proof, not without Relian's testimony. Aaron removed the crystal from its hiding place within the wristband. Then it's time I spoke with this ancient AI of yours. How do I activate it? Relian responds to consciousness, not commands. Zankal explained. It will evaluate you, your intentions, your understanding, your capacity for truth. Hold the crystal and open your mind. The rest will happen as it should. Feeling somewhat foolish, but with no better option, Aaron held the crystal in his palm and closed his eyes, trying to clear his thoughts of everything except his desire to understand, to know the truth of what had happened between Earth and the Conclave. For several long moments, nothing happened. Then, just as he was about to give up, he felt a presence, ancient, vast, and undeniably alien, touch his mind. You seek truth. It communicated, not in words, but in concepts that formed within his consciousness. Yet you do not seek power. Interesting. I seek understanding, Aaron replied. Speaking aloud, though, he sensed the entity could perceive his thoughts directly. Understanding is the beginning of wisdom. The presence acknowledged, but wisdom without action is merely contemplation. What will you do with the truth, Aaron Voss of Earth? The question struck at the heart of Aaron's dilemma. What would he do? What could one historian accomplish against centuries of calculated political maneuvering? I will honor it, he answered finally. I will give it voice. The presence seemed to consider this, its vast consciousness evaluating his in ways Aaron could barely comprehend. Then, without warning, information began to flow into his mind, not as data or facts, but as experiences, memories that were not his own, yet became part of him. He saw the MindNet catastrophe as it had happened, the initial confusion as millions of networked minds began to dim, the panic as the predatory entity began to feed, the desperate search for a solution. And then the humans, 12 scientists who had been studying consciousness transfer as a medical technology, volunteering for what they knew would be a one-way journey. He experienced their sacrifice, felt the moment they divided their consciousness across the infected networks, becoming a living firewall that isolated and starved the predatory entity. He witnessed their physical bodies failing as their minds were fragmented beyond recovery. And then the aftermath, the gratitude of the saved species turning gradually to unease as they realized the political implications. The debates in closed conclave sessions, the decision to manage the narrative, the gradual isolation of Earth justified by appeals to security and stability. When the vision ended, Aaron found himself on his knees, tears streaming down his face. The crystal in his hand now glowed with a steady inner light. You have been accepted, Zankal said softly. Relian has shared its memories with you. Not just memories, Aaron replied, his voice hoarse. Truth. History as it happened, not as it was recorded. He looked up at her, understanding dawning. Your ancestors, the Shari, they were among the most affected by the catastrophe. Your entire collective consciousness nearly destroyed. Yes, she acknowledged. We lost much, but we survived because of your people's sacrifice. That is why the Truth Reconciliation Committee exists, because some of us remember the debt, even if official history does not. Aaron rose to his feet, the glowing crystal still clutched in his hand. Relian contains the unaltered records, the proof of what actually happened. It does, Zankal confirmed. But proof alone may not be enough. Elar's faction controls the procedures. They can delay, object, require verification that would take months. The vote on the Lesser Planet Statute will happen in 2 days. Then we need more than proof, Aaron said, a plan forming in his mind. We need a symbol, something that cannot be procedurally dismissed or bureaucratically delayed. What do you propose? Aaron looked at the crystal, now pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. I need to learn more about the protocols surrounding Earth's empty chair, and I need to understand exactly what claiming that seat would entail. For the next day, Aaron immersed himself in conclave procedures, working with Zankal and her allies to understand the complex ritual and legal framework that governed the assembly. What he discovered both discouraged and inspired him. Claiming Earth's seat was, technically, possible, but required a formal presentation of credentials to the Security Council, followed by a probationary period that would extend well beyond the vote on the Lesser Planet Statute. By the time Earth could officially exercise its voice, the decision would be long made. Unless someone broke protocol entirely, the final session of the conclave was held in the Grand Chamber. With all 3,000 species represented, Earth's empty chair remained conspicuous among the filled seats of the inner circle, a silent testament to humanity's absence from galactic affairs. Ilar Thrun stood at the central podium, his imposing figure commanding attention as he formally presented the Lesser Planet Statute for final consideration. When so, we propose that worlds which have declined active participation in conclave governance for more than 50 standard cycles be reclassified as protected sovereign entities. He concluded, such worlds would retain their independence but would not exercise voting rights on matters of interstellar policy. This reclassification acknowledges the reality of their chosen isolation while ensuring galactic governance remains in the hands of those who have demonstrated commitment to collective decision-making. The chamber hummed with subdued conversation as representatives discussed the proposal among themselves. Aaron, watching from the observer's gallery, could see the political currents flowing. Ilar's faction had done its work well, building support through a combination of rational-sounding arguments and behind-the-scenes pressure. The chair recognizes Representative Zankal of the Shari, announced the conclave speaker. Zankal rose, her crystalline crest catching the light dramatically. Honored representatives, before voting on this matter, I move that we extend one final formal invitation to Earth to claim its seat. As the statute would directly affect Earth's status, basic principles of fairness suggest its representatives should have the opportunity to address this body. A murmur ran through the chamber. It was a delaying tactic, transparent to most, but procedurally difficult to dismiss. Ilar Thrun's eyes narrowed. The Earth observer has been present throughout these proceedings. If Earth wished to formalize its position, it has had ample opportunity. With respect, Overseer Thrun, Zankal countered, the current Earth representative holds observer status only. My motion simply suggests we clarify whether Earth wishes to claim its long vacant seat before we vote on a measure that would render that seat permanently empty. The speaker conferred briefly with advisors, then addressed the chamber. The motion has procedural merit. Does Earth's observer wish to address the conclave on this matter? All eyes turned to the gallery where Aaron sat. He stood, feeling the weight of thousands of alien gazes upon him. Earth's observer acknowledges the courtesy extended by Representative Zankal, he said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. However, as noted, I currently hold only observer status. I would request a recess to consult with my government regarding this significant matter. It was a standard diplomatic response, buying time, avoiding commitment. The speaker began to nod, prepared to grant the customary recess. But Ilar Thrun stepped forward again. With respect, Speaker, we have waited more than a century for Earth to consult with its government. This body has maintained Earth's empty seat out of courtesy, despite its persistent absence from galactic affairs. I submit that this final delay tactic merely confirms the necessity of the Lesser Planet Statute. The mood in the chamber shifted perceptibly. Even those sympathetic to Earth's position could recognize the pattern Ilar described: perpetual delay, perpetual absence. The recess is denied. The speaker announced, the conclave will proceed to a vote on the Lesser Planet Statute. Representatives, prepare to register your positions. A visual display appeared above the central platform, beginning to tabulate the votes as they were registered. Aaron watched, helpless, as support for the statute grew. not overwhelming, but steadily approaching the majority needed for passage. This was the moment history would remember, or forget. Aaron slipped away from the observer's gallery, moving quickly through corridors he had memorized during his preparation. In a small anteroom, Kreltor waited with a package. "Are you certain?" the massive alien asked as Aaron quickly changed his attire. "No," Aaron admitted, fastening the ceremonial armor, a replica of what the 12 human scientists had worn during their sacrifice, recreated from Relian's memories. "But certainty is a luxury we don't have." The armor was simple but distinctive, black with lines of glowing blue that represented neural pathways. And at its center, a crystalline housing where Aaron placed Relian's memory core. The moment he sealed it in place, the armor came alive, its pathways pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. "What happens next depends on whether they recognize the significance of this armor," Aaron said. "If they don't." "They will," Kreltor assured him. "The memory guardians are not forgotten, merely unmentioned. The older species will know." Aaron took a deep breath, centering himself. He was no longer merely a historian observing the past. He was about to become part of it. Then let's remind them of what they've tried to forget. In the grand chamber, the vote was nearing completion. Ilar Thrun stood triumphant at the podium, watching as the tally approached the threshold needed for passage. Earth's empty chair seemed to mock the proceedings, the very symbol of the absence the statute sought to formalize. "Representatives of the Conclave," Ilar began, preparing his victory statement. "As we conclude this historic vote," he was interrupted by a commotion at the chamber's main entrance. The massive doors swung open, and a figure strode through, a human in ceremonial armor that glowed with neural pathways, centered by a pulsing crystal that cast its light across the entire chamber. The reaction was immediate and electric. The older species representatives rose to their feet, expressions of shock and recognition clear even on alien features. Younger species looked confused but were caught up in the sudden tension that filled the air. Aaron walked steadily down the central aisle, directly toward Earth's empty chair. He made no announcement, sought no recognition from the speaker. The armor spoke for him, the armor of a memory guardian, of the human saviors whose sacrifice had been written out of history. "This is irregular," Ilar Thrun bellowed. "The Earth Observer has no authority to—" "Silence!" commanded a voice that had not spoken during the entire conclave, the eldest representative, a being so ancient that its species name had been forgotten by most. "The Guardian approaches. By oldest law, none may impede." Aaron continued his silent procession, aware of the historic weight of each step. When he reached Earth's chair, he paused, looking at it, empty for more than a century, waiting for humanity to claim its rightful place. Then, without ceremony or permission, he sat. The chamber erupted, some in outrage, others in awe, most in confusion. The speaker hammered for order, but the moment had transcended ordinary procedure. "Point of order," Ilar shouted above the din. "This individual has not presented credentials. He has not been recognized by the Security Council. This is a violation of every protocol." "Is it?" Aaron asked, his voice somehow carrying throughout the chamber despite its calm, measured tone. "Is it a violation of protocol when a world claims the seat that has been held for it, or is the violation in denying that world knowledge of why its seat exists at all?" He touched the crystal at the center of his armor, and Relian's consciousness expanded into the chamber's communication systems. Above the central platform, a holographic display formed, not showing the vote tally now, but images from the past. The MindNet catastrophe, the human scientist's sacrifice, the saved species, the subsequent cover-up. 123 years ago, Aaron continued as the images played. 12 humans gave their lives to save the Conclave from extinction. They divided their consciousness across infected networks, becoming living firewalls against a predatory entity that would have consumed every networked mind in the galaxy. The images shifted, showing the aftermath, the debates, the decisions to manage Earth's involvement. In gratitude, the Conclave created Earth's seat, placed it among the inner circle, acknowledging a debt that could never be repaid. But in fear of what such a debt might mean for the balance of power, the Conclave then systematically isolated Earth, reduced contact, and eventually rewrote history to minimize human involvement. Aaron stood, facing the assembled representatives directly. I ask you, if a species once saved your entire assembly, do they deserve to be discarded simply because they have been silent, especially when that silence was engineered by those who feared the truth? The chamber had grown utterly still. Thousands of alien beings absorbing the unaltered history Relian was revealing. Elar Thrun's voice, when it came, was cold with rage. These are fabrications, unverified claims from an unregistered AI. The protocols are clear. The protocols were written by those who sought to hide the truth. Aaron countered. Relian is the oldest artificial intelligence in the galaxy. A neutral observer that recorded events as they happened, not as politicians wished them remembered. He turned to address the entire assembly once more. I do not come to claim power based on ancient debt. I come to restore truth to the historical record. Earth does not seek special privilege, only recognition of its rightful place in a community it helped preserve. And what proof do you offer beyond these convenient images? Elar demanded. Anyone can create simulations. The proof is in your own restricted archives, Aaron replied. In the sealed records of the Emergency Conclave of 2318. In the original agreement that created Earth's seat, an agreement signed by ancestors of many in this chamber, including yours, Overseer Thrun. Murmurs spread through the assembly as representatives conferred with advisors, checking the validity of Aaron's claims through their own channels. Even if these events occurred as described, Elar said, his tone moderated but still dismissive. They happened over a century ago. Earth has shown no interest in conclave affairs since then. The Lesser Planet Statute simply acknowledges reality. A reality engineered by those who feared acknowledging their debt. Aaron responded, Earth did not choose isolation. It was gradually excluded, contact reduced, invitations delayed or obscured until the Great Collapse turned our focus inward. By then, the narrative had been established. Earth as the reluctant participant, not the excluded savior. He gestured to the formerly empty chair where he now stood. This seat was maintained not out of courtesy, but out of obligation. An obligation some would prefer to forget. I do not claim this seat permanently. I am not a formally designated representative, but I do claim humanity's right to have its true history acknowledged before this body votes to formalize its exclusion. The speaker, who had been consulting with various faction leaders during this exchange, finally spoke. The presentation of this historical evidence constitutes new information relevant to the Lesser Planet Statute. As such, I am suspending the vote pending verification of these claims and consultation among the representatives. It wasn't victory, but it was reprieve, a chance for truth to be examined before politics resumed its course. Elar Thrun's eyes blazed with barely contained fury. You exceed your authority. Speaker, the vote was nearly complete. The vote was proceeding based on incomplete information, countered Zankal, rising to stand beside Aaron. If we are to be a conclave of laws and principles, we cannot ignore evidence that challenges our understanding, however inconvenient it may be. Other representatives began to stand, first those allied with Zankal's faction, then older species whose memories stretched back to the catastrophe, and finally younger representatives intrigued by this dramatic challenge to established narrative. The balance was shifting, not conclusively, not irreversibly, but perceptibly. I move, said the eldest representative, its ancient voice commanding immediate attention, that the Lesser Planet Statute be tabled indefinitely, and that Earth's representative be formally recognized pending proper credentials from its government. I second the motion, Zankal said immediately. This is unprecedented. Elar objected. The Earth observer has violated protocols, interrupted a formal vote, presented unverified historical claims. All true, the Ancient One acknowledged. And yet, if those claims prove accurate, it is we who have violated the greater protocol, the obligation to truth that underlies all others. The speaker called for a procedural vote on the motion to table the statute. As representatives registered their positions, Aaron watched the tally with cautious hope it would be close. But the momentum had shifted, enough, perhaps, to prevent Earth's permanent exclusion. When the final count appeared, a narrow majority had supported tabling the statute. It was not defeated, merely delayed. But delay was all Earth needed to properly assert its position. The Lesser Planet Statute is tabled pending further review. The speaker announced. Dr. Aaron Voss of Earth is granted provisional recognition while formal credentials are arranged. This session of the conclave is adjourned for consultation. As the chamber began to empty, representatives breaking into animated discussion groups, Elar Thrun approached Aaron. The massive alien's composure had returned, his diplomatic mask firmly in place, but his eyes still burned with inner fire. You have won a temporary victory, historian, he said quietly, but you have also made powerful enemies. The conclave operates on stability and predictability. Your actions today threatened both. Truth often does, Aaron replied, but I did not come to overthrow the order you value. Overseer, I came to correct an injustice that undermined it. And what happens when every species with a historical grievance follows your example? When protocol is abandoned in favor of dramatic gestures and emotional appeals. Then perhaps the protocols need re-examination, Aaron suggested. A system that cannot accommodate truth is not a system worth preserving unchanged. Elar studied him for a long moment. You were sent here to observe, yet you chose to act. Why? Because some truths demand more than observation. Aaron said simply, they demand recognition. The alien overseer nodded slightly, a gesture that acknowledged the point without conceding it. The Truth Reconciliation Committee has sought this outcome for decades. They found in you a perfect instrument, a historian with the courage to become a participant. I underestimated both them and you. As Earth was underestimated before, Aaron noted, perhaps that is a pattern worth breaking for all our sakes. Perhaps, Elar allowed. But remember this, Earth human. Power gained through moral authority is still power. And all power brings responsibility. Your world now faces expectations it may not be prepared to meet. With that, he turned and left, his staff striking a measured cadence against the polished floor. Zankal approached as Elar departed. You have achieved what we thought impossible, she said. The truth is revealed, and Earth's position is secured, at least for now. For now, Aaron agreed. But much remains to be done. Earth must send a proper delegation, credentials must be arranged, and the full history must be documented for all to access. And you? She asked. Will you remain as Earth's representative? Aaron looked at the chair he had claimed. Earth's chair, empty no longer. No. I came to discover history, not to make policy. Earth will need to send someone qualified to participate in governance, someone with the authority to speak for all humanity. He removed the ceremonial armor, carefully extracting Relian's crystal. The ancient AI had retreated into its housing after sharing its memories with the assembly. Its purpose fulfilled for now. This belongs with your committee, he said, handing the crystal to Zankal. To ensure the truth remains accessible to those who seek it. And what will you tell Earth when you return? What will you say to those who sent you here without telling you what awaited? Aaron smiled slightly. I will tell them what I've learned, that history is not merely what happened, but what we choose to remember. And that choice shapes who we become. 3 days later, Aaron stood on the observation deck of the ship that would return him to Earth. Varquen receded in the distance, its crystalline spires catching the light of its star. He had done what he could, secured Earth's position, revealed the truth, ensured that humanity would have the opportunity to claim its rightful place in the galactic community. The Lesser Planet Statute had been tabled indefinitely, and Elar Thrun had been asked to step down from his position pending investigation into his role in suppressing historical records. What would happen next was beyond his control. Earth would need to decide whether to embrace its role in the conclave. to send representatives who could navigate the complex politics of interstellar governance. The truth had been revealed, but truth alone did not determine the future, only the choices made in light of it. As the ship accelerated toward faster-than-light speed, Aaron thought again of Enya, of what she would have said about his unexpected role in galactic politics. "You always said history wasn't just about the past," he murmured to her memory. "You were right, my love. It's about ensuring the future remembers accurately, so that we can become what we're meant to be." The stars blurred around him as the ship entered hyperspace, carrying him back to a world that would soon learn its true place in the cosmos, a place earned through sacrifice, nearly lost through manipulation, and reclaimed through the simple power of truth acknowledged. Behind him, on Varquen, Earth's chair no longer stood empty.